The member for Kooyong.
To rise to speak on this important MPI to critique the government's economic performance, because Margaret Thatcher, a great hero to those on this side, once said the problem with socialism is that you eventually run out of other people's money. And that's what's happening with this government. It's using other people's money to spend recklessly and as a result burdening future generations, shackling today's children and the leaders of tomorrow. Now, we know from testimony at Senate estimates just yesterday that the gross debt for the Commonwealth will hit $270 billion next month. By Christmas, it will rise to $290 billion and break through the $300 billion debt ceiling to hit $340 billion soon after that. Now, those on the other side have lifted the debt ceiling 4 times. First to $75 billion, then to $200 billion, then to $250 billion, now to $300 billion, and we know that is not enough. The party that has delivered us pink bats, overpriced school halls, the green loans, the cash for clunkers, grocery watch, fuel watch. Do we all remember the 2020 summit? This is all the creations of those on the other side. And as a result, their economic mismanagement has seen this country go greater and greater into debt. We also know from the March quarter national accounts that growth is only 0.6%. Why that's important is because that is half of what it was last year. And perhaps more worryingly, consumer sentiment is down 7% in May. 7% in May. That's as a result of the people of Australia losing confidence in the economic management on those opposite. Now, we've just had a budget. We've just had a budget which would normally be released with great fanfare to the Australian people. The galleries were half full, whereas with the Leader of the Opposition for his budget and reply, they were overflowing. And what did we learn in this budget? We learned in this budget that actually economic growth was going downwards to 2.75%, down from 3%. We also knew from this budget that unemployment was going up to 5.75%. That's as a result of this government's economic mismanagement. We also learnt that there were great broken promises in this budget. Remember those opposite writing to their constituents and telling them that there would be an increase to family tax benefit aid, none of which was delivered in this budget. What about their commitment to education? Their holier-than-thou commitment to be spending more on education. In fact, there was a $300 million cut in the budget to education and billions of dollars over the forward estimates. And they're robbing Peter to pay Paul by going to the tertiary education sector, which is supposed to be the hub of productivity and to actually be a great export earner for our country, and they've ripped money out of the higher education budget. In fact, Fred Hilmer, the Vice-Chancellor of the University of New South Wales, has said that the government's commitments in the Asian Century White Paper are now such a joke as a result of these cuts to higher education. And then there's the greatest broken promise. Over the carbon tax, there would be no carbon tax under a government I lead. There it is in this budget, promising that the carbon price will be $12 a tonne in the next coming years when we move to a floating price. $12 a tonne? Well, if you go to New Zealand, it's trading at 85 cents. If you go to the European Union, it's trading around $3 to $4. And the government has us believe that the carbon price will be $12 a tonne in just a couple of years. Again, there were great predictions about what the mining tax revenue will be producing for the Commonwealth. Currently, the mining tax produces just $200 million of revenue for the Commonwealth. But the government in the budget has promised that the revenue coming in from the mining tax will be $2 billion, a 1,000% increase on where it currently is. Now, if you take into account the high Australian dollar or changes to the dollar, if you take into account moving commodity prices, by the way, which are 15% higher than they were at the highest point under the Howard era, we can't take this government's funding commitments and their revenue promises at face value. In fact, it's another multi-billion-dollar black hole. But the best evidence of why you can't take this government's commitments at face value is because the Treasurer of Australia, the greatest treasurer in the history of the world, he'll have us believe, started his budget speech last year by saying, "Tonight I announce 4 years of budget surpluses." Well, there hasn't been a Labor budget surplus since 1989. You know what the #1 movie in 1989 was? Indiana Jones. Why is that interesting? Because Graham Perrett, the member for Moreton, said that this government's in more trouble than Indiana Jones. And in fact, in 1989, the #1 movie grossing was Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones was the #1 movie in 1989. That was the last year that the Labor Party delivered a budget surplus. And so when we have Wayne Swan come into this place last year and say, "Tonight I deliver 4 years of surpluses," we didn't believe him. And now the Australian people know why we didn't believe him. Because they've announced the 5th biggest budget deficit in the history of the Commonwealth, $19.5 billion, with another $18 billion the year after that. They will never, ever deliver a budget surplus. And those on the other side go on about the AAA credit ratings that they've been able to manage to achieve. Well, I can tell the House that we had AAA credit ratings when the economy was managed by Peter Costello and John Howard. In fact, we inherited in 1996 a AA credit rating. We lifted it to AAA. And Moody's and Standard & Poor's, the two key agencies, gave us that AAA credit rating. But the downgrades had come under the Labor government. So don't lecture us about AAA ratings, because the record of the Costello and Howard years was not only getting back that AAA rating which Labor had lost, but it was also paying back the $96 billion of government debt and leaving $70 billion in the bank. It was also about creating more than 2 million new jobs, getting the lowest unemployment and inflation in 3 decades. It was also about a 22% increase in real wages. That's what people are interested in, real wages growth. It was about getting industrial relations disputes down to record low levels. I'll tell you this fact, that in 2012, 301,000 days were lost to industrial disputes in Australia. But in the last year of the Howard government, what was that number? 49,700. That is the difference between us and them. We delivered real wages increases. We delivered 2 million new jobs. We delivered the lowest unemployment and inflation in 3 decades. We delivered a AAA credit rating, and we obviously paid back all that debt. And what we're seeing now, through the economic mismanagement of those opposite, is 20,000 plus new regulations, 30 new taxes. We're seeing a budget deficit year after year, and we're seeing gross debt quickly approach the $300 billion debt ceiling, which soon will be breached. We've seen more than 250,000 jobs being lost in small business. We've seen more than 100,000 jobs being lost in manufacturing. We've seen major financial decisions by companies to actually abandon big projects like the Port Hedland extension, like Olympic Dam, and obviously the sad news coming out of Ford for Broadmeadows and Geelong. Mr Acting Deputy Speaker, this is a really serious debate that the Australian people need to have. Because this government, when it came to power in 2007, you had Kevin Rudd promised to be an economic conservative. He's been anything but that. and Julia Gillard has just driven debt higher and higher to the cost of the Australian public. Thank you.
Has expired.